There are losses that end tournaments, and then there are losses that change the way a nation sees itself. Brazil did not just lose a soccer game on July 8, 2014. They lost something much deeper. They lost the illusion that the yellow shirt could protect them. They lost the belief that history, beauty, and 5 stars on the chest were enough. And they lost it in the most brutal way possible. 7 goals, not against a small team, not in a friendly, not in a game nobody cared about. 7 goals against Brazil, in a World Cup semifinal. For the rest of the world, it was shocking. For Brazil, it was almost impossible to understand, because Brazil was not supposed to be humiliated like that. Brazil was the country of Pelé, the country of Ronaldo, the country of Ronaldinho, the country that gave football its smile. For decades, Brazil did not just play the game. Brazil made the game feel alive. The yellow shirt meant joy. It meant rhythm. It meant defenders backing away because they knew something impossible was coming. It meant children around the world pretending to be Brazilian before they even understood what Brazil really was. Other countries had tactics. Brazil had magic. Other countries had systems. Brazil had imagination. And that is what made the 7-1 so devastating. Germany did not just beat Brazil. Germany made Brazil look ordinary. Worse than ordinary, they made Brazil look helpless. But the truth is, that night did not come out of nowhere. The collapse had been building for years, maybe even generations, because Brazil's greatest strength had always been its greatest burden. The world expected Brazil to be beautiful. Brazil expected Brazil to be eternal. And every generation that wore the yellow shirt was forced to carry the ghosts of every generation before it. To understand that pressure, you have to go back to the first ghost. 1950, Brazil hosted the World Cup. The final decisive match was at the Maracanã, the most sacred stadium in the country. The nation was ready to celebrate before the game had even been played. Brazil did not even need to win. They only needed a draw against Uruguay. A draw. That was it. The newspapers were already preparing victory headlines. The fans believed the title was destiny. The stadium was packed with a crowd so massive it felt less like a sporting event and more like a national ceremony. And then Uruguay scored. Brazil froze. The final whistle came. Uruguay had won 2-1. The Maracanã fell silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that does not just fill a stadium. It enters a country's memory. They called it the Maracanazo. And for Brazil, it became more than a defeat. It became a wound. A national scar. A reminder that even the most beautiful football nation on earth could be broken at home in front of its own people. For decades, Brazil tried to bury that pain under glory. In 1958, Pelé arrived as a teenager and helped Brazil win its first World Cup. In 1962, they won again. In 1970, Brazil created the team many still call the greatest in World Cup history. Pelé, Jairzinho, Carlos Alberto, football played like art. That team did not just win. It made winning look inevitable. Then came 1994, then 2002. Ronaldo, Rivaldo, Ronaldinho, Roberto Carlos, Cafu, a team full of stars, power, flair, and personality. In the final, Ronaldo scored twice against Germany. Brazil lifted its 5th World Cup, 5 stars, more than anyone else. And for a moment, the empire looked untouchable again. But history can be dangerous, because the more Brazil won, the heavier the shirt became. Every new Brazil team was not just judged against its opponent, it was judged against Pelé, against 1970, against Ronaldo, against the idea of Brazil. That is an impossible standard. And by the time the 2014 World Cup arrived, the pressure was unlike anything modern football had seen. Brazil was hosting again, for the first time since 1950. The ghost had returned. This was supposed to be redemption. This was supposed to be the tournament where Brazil finally erased the Maracanazo, not just by winning the World Cup, but by winning it at home. And this time, Brazil had Neymar. He was not Pelé. He was not Ronaldo. He was not Ronaldinho. He was something different. He was the hope of a new generation, the boy with the number 10. The face of Brazilian football, the one player who could still make people believe the old magic was alive. Every time Neymar touched the ball, the country leaned forward. Every goal felt like relief. Every smile felt like protection. But that was the problem. Brazil did not just need Neymar to play well. Brazil needed Neymar to carry a nation. And no player, no matter how gifted, should have to carry that much weight. As the tournament went on, the warning signs were there. Brazil were winning, but they were not convincing. They beat Chile on penalties, but it felt less like dominance and more like survival. They beat Colombia, but it was physical, emotional, and exhausting. And then, in that Colombia match, everything changed. Neymar was hit in the back. He went down. At first, it looked like another foul, another rough moment in a rough game, but it was worse. A fractured vertebra. His World Cup was over. Brazil's number 10 was gone. Their star was gone. Their symbol was gone. And then came another blow. Thiago Silva, the captain, was suspended for the semi-final. In one game, Brazil lost its face and its spine. Neymar was the dream. Thiago Silva was the calm. And against Germany, Brazil would have neither. Still, the country believed. Because it had to believe. This was Brazil. At home. One win from the World Cup final. The players walked out carrying Neymar's shirt. The anthem played. The fans sang louder than ever. The emotion was overwhelming. But emotion is not always strength. Sometimes, emotion is panic wearing a brave face. Brazil did not look calm. They looked desperate. They were not playing for a final anymore. They were playing for Neymar, for 1950, for Pelé, for the shirt. For every person in the stadium who needed them to make the pain go away. Germany walked onto that field with a plan. Brazil walked onto that field with a burden, and plans do not care about burdens. In the 11th minute, Germany scored. Thomas Müller, 1-0. The stadium went quiet for a second, but Brazil had been behind before. This was not disaster yet. Then came the 23rd minute. Miroslav Klose scored, 2-0, and with that goal, he became the all-time leading scorer in World Cup history, passing Ronaldo. Brazil's Ronaldo, on Brazilian soil. That was the moment the night turned cruel. Then, 1 minute later, Toni Kroos scored, 3-0. Before Brazil could even breathe, Kroos scored again, 4-0. Then Sami Khedira made it 5 goals, before the 30th minute. This was no longer a football match. This was a public collapse. The Brazilian players looked like they had been removed from their own bodies. David Luiz was running everywhere and nowhere. Marcelo looked lost. The midfield disappeared. The defense opened like a door. Germany were not celebrating wildly. They almost looked shocked by how easy it was, and that made it worse. Because Brazil were not being beaten by chaos. They were being dismantled by clarity. Pass, move, cut through, finish, again and again and again. By halftime, it was 5-0. A World Cup semi-final in Brazil. And by halftime, the dream was already dead. Imagine the worst collapse in American sports. Now, imagine it happening in a home World Cup semi-final, with the whole world watching. Now imagine that your team is not just a team, it is part of your national identity. That was Brazil. The second half felt less like competition and more like punishment. Germany added a 6th, then a 7th, and when Oscar scored late for Brazil, nobody celebrated. How could they? A goal at 7-1 does not heal the wound. It only reminds everyone how deep the wound is. When the final whistle blew, some Brazilian players fell to the ground. Some stared into space. Some cried. David Luiz apologized to the nation. Fans in the stands covered their faces. Some had already left. Others stayed because leaving would have meant accepting that it was real. The scoreboard said Brazil won, Germany 7. But the scoreboard could not explain what had actually happened. Brazil had not just lost a game. Brazil had lost control of its own story. The country that made football beautiful had been made ugly in front of the world. The team that was supposed to represent joy looked terrified. The shirt that once made opponents nervous suddenly looked heavy enough to crush the men wearing it. That is why 7-1 still follows Brazil. Because great teams lose, champions lose, dynasties lose, but Brazil lost in a way that attacked the myth. Before that night, Brazil's past felt like armor. After that night, it felt like a weight. And since then, every Brazil team has lived with the same question. Can they ever truly escape it? They still produce stars. They still have speed, skill, and talent most countries would dream of. Neymar became Brazil's all-time leading scorer. Vinicius Jr. became one of the most dangerous attackers in the world. Rodrigo, Endrick, Alisson, Marquinhos, the talent did not disappear. But talent has never been Brazil's problem. Brazil always has talent. The question is whether Brazil can handle being Brazil. Because every World Cup now brings the same pressure. If Brazil wins, people say they were supposed to. If Brazil loses, people say the empire is fading. And if Brazil collapses, even for one night, the world says the same number again, 7-1. It is no longer just a score. It is a shadow, a reminder, a warning. The beautiful game is not enough anymore. The world has changed. Football is faster now, more organized, more tactical, more ruthless. Germany in 2014 did not beat Brazil because they respected the myth. They beat Brazil because they ignored it. They did not care about Pelé. They did not care about the yellow shirt. They did not care about the crowd. They had a structure. They had calm. They had a plan. And Brazil had emotion. That is the lesson. The old Brazil could survive on genius. The new Brazil cannot. The next great Brazilian team will not only need flair, it will need control. It will need identity. It will need players strong enough to wear the shirt without drowning in what it represents. Because the yellow shirt is still the most iconic shirt in football, but it is also one of the heaviest. When a Brazilian player puts it on, he is not just wearing a jersey. He is wearing Pelé's smile, Ronaldo's redemption, Ronaldinho's joy, Neymar's tears, the Maracanazo, the Mineirão, 5 stars, 1 scar. And maybe the only way Brazil can become Brazil again is to stop chasing the ghosts of what Brazil used to be. Maybe they do not need to recreate 1970. Maybe they do not need the next Pelé. Maybe they do not need to prove that football can still be beautiful. The world already knows that. Brazil taught us. What Brazil needs now is something different. Honesty. The honesty to admit that history can inspire you, but it can also suffocate you. The honesty to admit that the 7-1 was not just bad luck. It was a warning that magic without structure can collapse, a warning that emotion without control can break, a warning that even the greatest football nation on earth is not protected from reality. But that does not mean the story is over, because Brazil is still Brazil. And football still feels different when Brazil is great, when the yellow shirts are moving together, when the crowd is singing, when a winger takes on a defender, and the whole stadium rises before anything has even happened. There is still nothing like it. The world still wants Brazil to be beautiful. But now, Brazil has to learn how to be strong, too. One day, the World Cup will give them another moment, another knockout game, another stadium full of pressure, another night where the whole world is watching. And somewhere in the background, that old scoreline will be waiting, 7-1, the night the empire broke, the night Brazil learned that beauty can be destroyed. The question now is not whether Brazil can produce another superstar. They will. The question is not whether Brazil can make the world dream again. They can. The real question is much harder. Can Brazil finally carry its history without being crushed by it?